It's time to travel again, and wherever you are in the world, we've got the perfect companion for you. But it's not this map. Today we're going to talk to you about Fratello's latest collaboration. This time we've teamed up with NOMOS Glashütte to bring you a very special edition of the Zurich Weltzeit. But before we get into exactly what we've changed about this watch, let's dive into the specs. Reading the specifications out loud doesn't tell the whole story. The NOMOS Glashütte Zurich Weltzeit is 39.9mm wide. It's 10.9mm thick and it's 49mm from lug to lug. However, due to an edge-to-edge sapphire, a narrow bezel and a very wide dial aperture, the watch appears much larger on the wrist than it actually is. In fact, it's more similar to most 42mm watches. The case is topped by a very slightly domed sapphire crystal. The same is true of the case back. Here we can see the DUW 5201 movement through a sapphire display window. This movement is an in-house automatic with an operating frequency of 21,600 VPH and a power reserve of 42 hours. This model has a 30-meter water resistance. That means it's not perfect for ocean exploration, but that's not what it's intended for at all. This watch desires to be above the clouds. It is a globetrotter's timepiece, the perfect watch for a debonair jet setter that wants something a little bit more business appropriate than the standard Rolex GMT Master 2, for example. What this means is that we're left with an incredibly visually intuitive GMT complication able to show a second time zone. Now this really matters to me because I travel a lot and actually struggle to use a GMT complication when it's displayed normally. An extra hour hand using a 24-hour scale and sometimes a bezel to indicate an additional third time zone is rather visually complex, in my opinion. So the big question on everyone's lips, how does it work? What we have here is a watch set up to the local time of The Hague. At the moment the time is 1:45 in the afternoon. That is indicated by the central hour and minute hand and also by this 24-hour disc at 3 o'clock. The 24-hour disc at 3 o'clock never changes. So whenever you travel around the world, that will remain the same. It will always be linked to your home time. You're reminded of that by the small house icon right here next to the Dutch orange triangle. Now let's say I want to travel one time zone to the east, to Athens. All I have to do is press this pusher at 2 o'clock. The hour hand will advance by 1 and the city disc will rotate counterclockwise to show Athens at the very top of the dial. If you study the 24-hour disc at 3 o'clock, you will notice it hasn't moved at all. It's still showing me the home time in The Hague. If I were to travel further east, let's say another 3 time zones, I press the button 3 times. Now the central hour and minute hand show me the local time, but still the home time remains on time with that in The Hague. Now moving beyond the dial, one of the most arresting aspects of the NOMOS Zurich family in general is the case design. NOMOS here has fused industrial lines with organic curves, which was the calling card of the late great Swiss designer Hannes Wettstein, who was based, surprise surprise, in Zurich. Wettstein is the man behind the Zurich case design. It is definitely the most complicated case NOMOS has ever produced. Why is it so complicated? Because to execute Wettstein's vision, the case had to be broken apart into many separate components. You can see this most clearly when you study the lugs. Each one of these 4 lugs is detachable. It is then finished individually away from the case. It is impossible to apply this kind of organic surface to the top of the lug while it is attached to the case without destroying the bezel in the process. That's why the end result looks almost impossible to imagine. The flawless fit of the lugs against the case band and the bezel makes for a completely unique visual. You might have noticed already, but I have a tendency to look for watches that have that one standout element that provides me with long-term satisfaction from wearing the watch. In this case, that element is the case. It's really hard to express exactly how interesting this thing is to look at from all these different angles and in different lights without you having it in your hands. But believe me, it's not just the lugs, it's not just the bezel. The case band as well, the very case middle, is a bowl shape. When you have all of these elements together, combining, you end up with a sculpture on your wrist designed by one of the most esteemed designers of the late 20th century. This watch was conceived back in 2018 when I was working for Nomos and traveling around the world for them. I had the standard model on my wrist. Now it is my great pleasure that 3 years later we've been able to bring it to life. There will only be 25 pieces of this model made. It will be available from the Fratello shop, and the price will be €4,620 including VAT, which may differ slightly depending on your region. With such a limited production number, make sure you visit fratellowatches.com and sign up to our newsletter to stay abreast of developments. But put this date in your calendar. The watch will launch at 6 AM Central European Time on September 30th, 2021. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button for more videos like this one. We'll see you next time. Oh, what a mess. Oops. I hope that wasn't anyone's grandfather's map.